As I mentioned earlier, the sole plate establishes a very precise surface for the heavier track to be placed on. As you can see, this means a lot of standoff bolts to allow adjusting. To be accurate, this activity was done at night, so the plate would be at a uniform temperature. And the alignment is made and verified using laser measurement. Now, in order to cement the sole plate into its exact location, grout is used. Over time, the original grout began to break down. You can see here where shims were used to help keep the track usable. NASA decided to switch to a newer grout material, more resilient to the intrusion of hydraulic fluid. But so far, it had only been used for track replacements on 34-meter antennas, as seen here in Canberra, Australia. As you can see, these tracks are only about a foot wide. So the question was, can it flow effectively under a 44-inch wide track, and would it have acceptable fill? To test this and become familiar with the new material, a number of test boxes with clear tops were constructed, matching both the thickness and the width in which the grout would need to flow. Mixing and filling these test structures gave the team both experience working with the material and proved it could confidently fill under the sole plate without unacceptable air bubbles. Since, as with adjusting the sole plates, the grout would need to be inserted at night when the plate would be at a unified temperature, these tests were also performed after dark. Once satisfied, the forms were built. An area to mix the grout was prepared. "44 batches of material were needed. They were poured into 5-gallon buckets, transported to the top of the scaffold, and poured by hand into the forms. As a side note, I recorded the time each batch was mixed and the time each was poured into the form, and took a small test sample of each. Once the grout set up, The adjusting bolts were removed, and it was time to start reassembling the antenna. First came the interior reservoir wall, which was partially assembled into place, since later the track segments would be in the way. Then each of the 11 track segments were lifted by crane. Video sped up a bit here. In order to allow the crane to lower the heavy segments directly onto the track bed, a section of the antenna assembly was removed, providing a single spot where the crane could place segments. They were then placed on air bearings, which allowed the crew to manually slide each segment to its final location. The track was then bolted together. Now it's time to lift the antenna off the legs. Jacks are placed on the new track. The truck, which keeps the antenna centered by riding against a rail, is loosened so the structure is free to move up. The jacks are pressurized. The bolts holding the legs to the foundation are removed. And the pins holding the legs to the lift structure at the top are removed. The lift structure supports are removed and lowered to the ground. And the newly machined pads which support the antenna structure on a thin film of hydraulic fluid while in motion are returned to the antenna. After removal, these pads were machined to make them 2 inches shorter, to compensate for the fact that the new track is 2 inches thicker than the original.